Most of the thousands of members of R-CALF USA are cow-calf producers and backgrounders and stockers. Each year, most of our members market their cattle to cattle feeders, not to packers. From the vantage point of feeder calf sellers, there appears to be robust competition in the cattle market in the form of numerous bidders seated in our auction yards, bidders participating in video auctions, and country order buyers offering contracts. But what our members who are independent feeders know, and what cow-calf producers, backgrounders, and stockers need to know, is that independent cattle feeders are on the front lines of a battle over the competitiveness of the entire live cattle industry. Our independent feeders are losing this battle, and their loss will soon be transferred to every market for every class of cattle sold at every weight. This is why every seed stock producer, cow-calf producer, backgrounder, and stocker, and feeders need to join this fight right now before it's too late. Just since 1997, about 19,000 independent U.S. feedlots have exited this industry, a loss of about 18%. That's 19,000 fewer competitive buyers for your feeder cattle during a 10-year span. Do you think that has an impact on the prices you receive for your calves? You bet it does. And it will get worse if we don't step up and win this fight right now. Here's how to put this in perspective. Our cattle industry is like a 10-story pyramid. At its base and for the first 8 stories are 967,000 cow-calf producers, backgrounders, and stockers, who all sell their cattle to the feeders on the 9th and 10th stories, near the pyramid's peak. On the 9th story are 85,000 farmer feeders, and at the very peak, on the 10th story, are about 2,100 feedlots that feed almost 90% of all the fed cattle in the United States. And balanced on the very top of the pyramid are just 4 meat packers, only 3 if the JBS National Beef merger goes through. And these few packers purchase about 88% of all the fed cattle. Importantly, the price of all the feeder cattle in the first 8 stories of this pyramid depends on the price that these 3 or 4 meat packers pay to the relatively small number of the largest feedlots located at the very peak of the pyramid on the 10th floor. For example, if the price of fed cattle goes up $18 per hundredweight, as it did between 2002 and 2003, and then stays there through 2004 like it did when R-CALF blocked imports of high-risk Canadian beef and cattle, the price of your 500-weight calves will go up by $27 per hundredweight, just as you experienced during that same period. But just the opposite is true if fed cattle prices go down. The feeders will recover their losses by paying less for your calves, and that is why it is so vitally important for cow-calf producers to protect the competitiveness of the cattle feeders market. The cattle feeders market is the eventual cow-calf market, as there is no other use for feeder calves other than to feed them for slaughter. So what must we do? The answer is that the entire cattle industry must fight to protect the competitiveness of fed cattle prices. We must inform ourselves on how the handful of meat packers are working to reduce this competition by restricting producers' timely access to the marketplace through the use of packer-owned cattle and new fed cattle procurement tools like formula contracts and certain marketing agreements that allow packers to take fed cattle out of the marketplace without ever establishing a price. We must put an end to these practices that do nothing but reduce competition and give meat packers control over your cattle prices. We can do this by updating the nearly 90-year-old Packers and Stockyards Act so it reflects today's market conditions, and by enforcing our U.S. antitrust laws. R-CALF is leading the fight on both of these fronts. We successfully included a ban on packer ownership of livestock in the U.S. Senate version of the Farm Bill in both 2002 and 2008, only to have it stripped away by the meat packers and their NCBA ally in the House side of Congress. But we must not stop until we bury this anti-competitive practice. On the antitrust front, R-CALF and its members successfully encouraged the U.S. Department of Justice and 17 state attorneys general to take action to block perhaps the most compelling and far-reaching merger ever proposed in our industry. The Brazilian firm JBS, wanted to purchase the nation's fourth and fifth largest beef packers and the nation's largest feedlot company, Five Rivers. The government filed a lawsuit to block the merger between JBS and National Beef, but it did not address the feedlot component of this merger. Even so, it is truly unprecedented to have 17 states and the Justice Department take enforcement action to protect the competitiveness of our U.S. cattle industry. Because the government's action did not address the captive supply problem inherent in the Five Rivers component of this merger, RCAF joined with another like-minded organization, and we filed a separate lawsuit that addresses captive supplies and the impacts that reduced competition will have on cow-calf producers, seed stock producers, backgrounders, and stockers. This legal action is the first attempt and the first genuine opportunity for the live cattle industry to halt the fast-paced trend towards more and more concentration and consolidation and less competition. This could be the most important issue our U.S. cattle industry has faced since the breakup of the beef packing cartels back in the 1920s. Your membership in RCAF USA will help us restore competition in your U.S. cattle market.